my God.
Hello. Welcome to the Mother Daze podcast. I am your host, Sarah Wright Olsen.
And I'm Teresa Mark. How's it going? We were giggling because Daniel's eyes are so bright blue
Bright lights,
from here.
bright blue,
bright green.
same color.
But
as
he's wearing
shirt.
this really soft, baby, blue sweater. And we're like, wow, it really makes your eyes pop.
Should I take it off?
Yeah,
Nope.
can you?
Is it
Show
too
us all
much?
your tattoos under there.
It's 444 right now. It's 444, guys.
And 1144 here. I don't know what that meaning is, but cool.
Nothing.
Yeah. 30
No.
minutes past 11:11. So
You guys, we are so excited because we have a very special guest on with us today. We have Daniel Ahearn with us. He is a licensed marriage and family therapist. He's a dedicated therapist, meditation teacher, advocate for attachment-focused therapy, mindfulness, eco-psychology. I hope I said that right. Didn't go to college. And social justice principles and applied community psychology. Daniel empowers individuals, couples, and communities to cultivate resilience, restore attachment bonds, and create meaningful change in their lives. He also has a super sick tarot deck called Pathwork Oracle cards.
So beautiful.
That were designed with his friend and artist, Anna Terrain. So we are so excited to have you on today. I mean, the list of things that you do and have done is so long that I had to make it micro, but we're so excited to dive in and have
he's a
you
daddy.
on.
And you're
He's a daddy.
He's got 2 little boys.
You have kids.
Yeah.
Can you say that your kids' names? Because they're so cute.
Yeah, I have a teen. He's 15. His name is Wyatt. And I have a 2-year-old, and his name is Lev.
Oh, that's so sweet. Wyatt
so cute.
is so cute.
Isn't that cute? It's like Wyatt,
I love
but
it.
with the th on the
I
end.
love-
He was yeah.
So Mark and I've often referred to Daniel as my guru. because
Yeah, I appreciate it.
you, we met through Moby. We met through Moby, who my husband's working with at the moment. And it was in kind of the early years when I was exploring my spirituality and getting interested in meditation. And we definitely did some sensory deprivation meditation in the very dark room in Moby's
right.
castle. You came to a few of those, didn't
Oh,
you?
yeah. It was so weird. Yeah, I remember that.
Thank God you
Yeah.
said it, because I would be freaked out.
Yeah, it was so wild.
It was really confronting. And I've never done anything like that before. And I remember
Or
bringing,
since.
Yeah,
or since, I
that
remember
was it.
bringing, I brought Mark to 1 or 2 of them and was like, this is my friend Moby. And this is this weird random thing that we do, but it's really cool. And at first, I remember feeling so claustrophobic and kind of afraid because I couldn't see anything. But everyone was really chanting and really going to these amazing meditative places. And every single time I fell asleep. So I would sleep for the entirety of it. Sometimes it would go for an hour and a half. It would be the collective group's energy would choose when the practice was going to end. We'd all sort of just quieten down, and then Moby would relight the candle, and then, we'd process what everyone sort of experienced. I was always asleep. So every single time. And then I just had this thing in my head where I was like, well, I just can't meditate. That's just not my thing. I was like, my mind is too busy. And the moment that I start thinking about meditating, I just fall asleep. So it's just not for me. And Daniel was the person that helped me reframe my idea and maybe my self-judgment with meditation, because it is a really beautiful thing. And even I've sat with him a few times, and I'd always be like, but my mind gets distracted. I start thinking about something, and then I'll bring myself back. And Daniel was like, oh, well, that is meditation. What you're doing is meditating. And I want to just kind of start there. I mean, you've obviously had a transformative relationship with meditation. And how can you help us folk who have these judgments and who just don't participate in it? What can you speak to that?
Sure. Yeah, totally. I mean, we all have judgments, right? I think part of part of what you talk about, I think fundamentally is meditation is allocating time towards sitting and practice, right? That's what it means. And you can do any number of things. You can do body scanning. You can count your breaths. You can do mantras. You can do visualizations. And really, depending on the lineage and the tradition, it's noticing what arises. And I think what a lot of us notice is what you spoke to. One, that our minds are very, very, very busy all of the time. And when we try and actually build concentration and focus on something, it's quite painful. We can't. We bounce around a lot. And there's a lot of language in our culture that really is punitive about that, sort of judging us for doing that. And then implicit in that is the self-judgment that arises, like, oh, I'm bad at this. Mm-hmm. That's a really curious thing to sit with. Like when I try and still my mind, I notice I have all these judgments. And I think if you spend more time sitting with that, there's something beneath that judgment. There's a quietness and there's a stillness and there's a sense of connection that you can find and maybe a peace. But you do have to get through that hurdle. And that hurdle is very, very commonly shared, in working with adults and with teens. That is a common refrain. I can't do it. My mind is so busy. And the idea is, well, that's actually why we want to spend time doing it. So were you to try and learn how to downhill ski, right? And you only spent 5 minutes every week, you probably wouldn't make a lot of progress. But if you sort of allocate time moment to moment, day to day, you build that skill. And ultimately, meditation is about increasing consciousness and like learning how to be conscious. And then by being conscious in the practice of meditation, you train the body and the mind to notice that consciousness. And then you move through the world with more of that in the day to day. And then with that, you can go deeper and deeper, and you can develop skills of emotion regulation, and you can develop skills around kindness and compassion, and ultimately discover a sense of interconnection, that we actually are very connected and we are interdependent on one another. We are really sharing this experience. And that's when things start to get more and more interesting for me, just in the practice of meditation.
Oh, I think that is such, even just the way you talk, I'm always like, every time I'm around Daniel, I feel about 30 years younger and more connected to myself.
Well, we're connecting.
We are connecting. I remember meeting Daniel again. It was at Moby's house, and it was around in his kitchen in that little area. There's like a little like built-in bench, like this rounded bench that we would sit down and we would have like vegan feasts and whatever. And Daniel made such strong eye contact. Like when you talk to someone, you held my hand and you shook my hand and you really looked into me. And I was like, oh my God, he's looking into the soul. I mean, he can see straight into the soul. Is what he's seeing okay? Does it look okay in there?
Yeah,
and I would always, I'd find myself, thank you. I would find myself being like, oh my God, hold the eye contact. Like, why do I get uncomfortable with eye contact?
So many people do though.
I've never met someone who's like more in their body, so unbelievably present, that when like me and Mark and Daniel started really broing out and hanging out together, you sort of fell into this kind of role. I mean, I think we sort of placed you in this role of if we were ever going through anything, to do with attachment stuff and relationship, I would phone Daniel and be like, you need to help me figure out Mark. Like, what is going on with Mark? And then Daniel is the first phone call Mark ever makes. If he really just needs someone to talk to and help him process emotions, it's always Daniel. So I was like, oh yeah, he's our guru, he's our mentor. Whenever we need just like some like recalibration or, some sort of emotional exchange, a conversation, connection, we call Daniel.
I appreciate that. Well, I love Mark, like first and foremost. Like obviously I love you and I love Mark, and like, to think about Mark and everything that he has come from and what he's grown up in and what adversity he's overcome as an artist, and like such a sensitive, beautiful person navigating the world. I mean, he and I share a lot in childhood of like not learning these skills of like how to connect and how to stay connected, but wanting to, and how much pain that causes. I think a lot for men too. There aren't very many men, and it's why I'm so fond of your husband, who like advocate for presence and communication and clarity and and to move away from aggression and sort of these prototypical masculine things that look down on sensitivity and vulnerability. And it's obviously really needed. And I appreciate the compliment. I'm to your point, I think about eye contact and attunement. Like these are things I'm very interested in terms of psychotherapy, and in terms of meditation and in Dharma, this idea of like connecting and what it means to connect. And you as mothers, like there's so much nonverbal communication that goes into parenting, and like honest, nonviolent communication, right? So like just being present with someone, I'm sure both of you can attest to, when your husband comes home without even seeing him, you can sort of feel how he is and how he's doing. So there's so much of this that we have innately in the human animal, this instrument. And to work on that and really to pay attention to that and to see someone like, oh, I see you. And like to turn your attention to someone, immediately you begin to sort of co-regulate and share the emotion. You can feel if someone's stressed. And again, if you're interested in meditation, these are cool things to work with. If I want to be a compassionate person, if I want to have love in my life, like I look for opportunities to practice. And there are a lot.
I love that you're talking about that, because I think, Teresa and I, we did like a breathwork thing that we talked about on here, and it was like a cacao ceremony, and it was
with
really fun and
cool.
crunchy and wonderful, but it was crazy, the experience afterwards, because I told Tez, like, I don't think I've ever felt more in my body than I did after this breath work. And I know that I was like communicating to, the universe. I was like talking to my team of light. I was connecting with like a pregnancy loss I had. I was doing all these things sort of as this breath work was happening and afterwards. And like, it was really powerful. But then after we left, I felt so present. And I was like, God, Des, like, how do we hold on to that? Like that feeling was, I felt so open in a different way. And like, I remember reading this book by Glennon Doyle, and she talked about how she made herself go into her closet for 5 minutes every day to meditate until like she could really teach herself like how to do that. And that practice, that discipline of just like making herself go and try it and do what you're saying, like the downhill skiing or like whatever it is, if you're going to keep practicing at something, until she got to a place where it really opened her up. And so I think that having that as a parent is so amazing if you can do it, because your kids notice everything. I mean, when you're talking about your partner coming home, think about your children. Like I look at my kids sometimes and I'm like, wow, they really felt that energy from me that I just came in with, and like, I wasn't really aware of it because I wasn't in my body or whatever. I was just like, from a phone call I had or like work or whatever. And I walk in and the kids are like bracing, like,
yeah.
Oh, you okay, Mom?
Yeah,
like,
yeah. If you can introduce into your life to model for your children that contemplation and quiet and reflection and being alone and sitting with yourself, and to the story you shared about cacao, like there is something so exponential. It something so exponential, the power of human connection. If we sit together in a group and we breathe and you take cacao, and that's something that sort of opens you up. Like part of our superpower as a species is the collaborative spirit. And if you can learn to cultivate that and model that for your children, who cares what method they have it? Like he's going to skip meditation anytime. Like, hey, you want to sit with me? He's like, I'm good. But he knows that his dad practices. And that's good enough for me, like to model that for your children, to bring that into the household, because we're dealing with so much. And I think pertinent to children, there's never been a harder time to be a teenager, so they're taking on so much, there's so much information that they have to take on day to day, and to model that with presence rather than another distraction, I think is really radical and like a really beautiful thing to bring into your consciousness and the consciousness of your family, with full understanding that trying to bring these strategies and this awareness in for Westerners is really new to the human experience, right? I mean, there was a lot of meditation going on in my bloodline, that like my parents didn't do it, my grandparents didn't do it. So to welcome these things, a reflection or attunement, to like address your children and be like, wait, how are you? Like, tell me what's going on, and really listen in a collaborative way. I mean, the mental health benefits of that are profound, for sure.
Well, you have a teenager, and so does Teresa, and we also have 11-year-olds.
Just right there.
Can you talk to us a little bit about how you incorporate some of your practice with your teen? Because I know a lot of times I hear parents, and Tez and I have said it too, where we get a little nervous about like the teen years, like what are we going to be faced with? So can we talk a little about that?
I would love to. Thank you for asking. One of the things that I get to do is I work in adolescent short-term treatment. So I'm the director of culture of this teen facility called Olsen. It's like a 9-facility place in California. And we deal with teens in crisis. 12 to 18, it's like 45 to 60 days. Kids were really, really, really struggling. And one of the brutal things that you hear with these kids is the parents struggling with that. Like, oh my God, the teen years are so difficult. And we really try and reframe that. The idea is like the teen years should be the celebration of watching this person that you've raised enter the world with skills and curiosity and exploring the world. And ideally, as they're exploring it, they want to come back and share everything with you. And if that's been disrupted, then maybe we can repair it. I find having a teenager be so beautiful because all of the work and the care and the opportunity we had in early childhood, now we're getting to see this young man enter the world. And I find the experience really stunning. It's not without difficulty, right? There's the hormones happening. There is the warfare of social media interacting with the teen's well-being. There's the warfare of the world interacting with their consciousness. And I think a really beautiful thing with the teen parenting is to move from correction into like connection, like any opportunity you can to connect with your teen and collaborate with them and understand what's going on with them and engender in them the skill and the strength and the compassion to make the next right move. And if they stumble, you're with them to repair it. Again, a very different model than maybe we grew up with, but I don't ascribe to the idea like teens should raise themselves. I think parents of teens need to move in even more, but in a more nuanced way. Like I'm protecting Lev from the world, from like tripping and falling and like choking and whatever. And I'm trying to protect the world from my teen. It's very different. I want to like build into my teen all of these skills so he's prepared. And when he finds adversity, he feels comfortable and safe to return to me, and return to his mom and to talk about it. So I think there's a lot of opportunity, and there are practical ways that you can do that, because in the teen brain, your child is 11 going on 12. So as his brain is beginning to form the prefrontal cortex, and there's the ability to regard self, right? It's called metacognition. So basically in adolescence, as the brain forms and all the hormones arrive, it's kind of the first time the person comes online, and they're like, okay, who am I? Like, what's going on with me? What's happening? Who am I? They start to think about themselves, which is a beautiful expansion of the technology of the brain, but it can be really tricky to ask them to just do it for themselves, right? So you want to get in and you want to model thinking for them. You want to ask your teen, like, hey, what are you thinking about? And you really want to offer how to do that by showing them what you're thinking about. So I'll give you an example. You pick up your teen from school and they get in the car and maybe they're like sullen. They just want to put on headphones and not talk. And you say like, oh, I'm thinking in this moment, you just want to be alone, and maybe you had a rotten day. It seems like you had a rotten day, but you're risking showing them what you're thinking about. And it gives them the chance to say, oh, no, I was just thinking and I wanted to listen to this song or whatever it is. Or they say, yeah, I did have a shitty day and this is what happened and I am upset. You're immediately collaborating, as opposed to the model of, the kid gets in with the headphones and the parent says like, oh, you're going to have the headphones again? You don't want to talk to me? And it's really already combative. So the offering is to find a way to like join the teen in the experience, to model to them that you're thinking, to model to them that they can learn how to think for themselves. And you can find ways to sort of stay connected. It seems simple, but it's really a powerful thing to do. And I've watched parents completely change their experience by engaging with their teens this way. Wow. I want my teen, I want everyone's teen to feel like the parents, I'm on your side. We're going to figure this out. You beautiful child, we're going to figure this out in this world together. So you want to pierce the veil of the matrix of their thought being too much of a first person player game. You want to show them that there are other perspectives and that there can be a multiplicity of perspectives, and we can actually have different perspectives and still totally get along.
And how does that manifest itself, like that way of being? When you pull it to things like just having boundaries surrounding, for instance, and I don't know what your boundaries are at your household, but like the social media aspect is probably the most terrifying thing. I mean, Australia just passed a law that no one, did you see that? No one under 16 can have social media or use social media, which I think is amazing and radical and so great. But I also have a teenager, and like they're on their phone. He loves being on TikTok. He loves being on the social media stuff. Everything that you're saying, how do we then work that into this, the pressures of friends? And if they don't do it, they're going to be left out of the friendship group, or if they're not, I just don't really know how to navigate all that, because I feel like I will be the hardcore that's like no phone, no social media, and that could be quite isolating, and I'm sure in some ways push them away even further.
Of course, yeah, absolutely. We can't punish the children for the world that we built for them. We built this world and they're just growing up in it. I mean, it is the sort of evolutionary directive of the teen to push back on the adult. That's their job. That's like, didn't you do that? I know Mark did that. Like that's
terrible.
What we did.
Yeah.
Right. So we want to be with them in that struggle and in that push pull. I think boundaries are important. Rules are important. It's saying to the teen, like, these are my rules, and I understand if you don't like them, and I wouldn't like them either. And I get if you're upset, and if you're upset about them, that's cool. You're totally welcome to be upset. And those are the rules, like stay engaged, like if your teen has friends, get to know them. Don't just have judgments about them. If your teen is on their phone, ask them what they're getting into. And if they're like, they don't want to tell you, respecting those boundaries are cool. You say, oh, I can understand there's some things you don't want to tell me, but you keep trying and you keep sort of navigating. The metaphor you can use is the teen is trying to score the goal and you're trying to block them from scoring the goal. And this is sort of an ongoing game, but you stay involved. I think fundamentally what you want to do is just advocate to collaborate with them and stay connected and have understanding. I said this often, but it's such a wild statistic that teenagers and children are witnessing like 2,000 advertisements a day. So depending on your ego strength, that's playing a lot on your insecurities of what you're not and what you should be and what you want to be. And to meet them in that struggle and be curious with them and talk to them, I think is fundamental to family health. Also, spend time with them. We're so busy doing so many things, that people sort of lose the thread and miss the opportunity. So in talking about attunement and eye contact, prioritize meals, prioritize time every day, stay current. We always do rosebud thorn, which right. So the benefit for those who don't know, what was your rose today, something that was good, what was your thorn, what kind of sucked, what was your bud, what are you looking forward to? And look, it doesn't matter what it was. What it builds in is this understanding of things change, that you can have a crappy day and still have a good thing to happen. You can have a good day and something crappy to happen, that there's change. And it's very different to inform a teen who's so filled with feelings and so overwhelmed and maybe thinking like, oh, I'm an angry teen, or I'm a sad teen, or I'm an unhappy teen, to I'm a teen who's having a sad moment. I'm a teen who's having an angry day. And again, all these things are cumulative. So those things come to mind. And those are things that I work on with teens and their families, sort of metacognition, thinking about thinking, shared time, collaborative behavior, and then a lot of compassion, like so much compassion.
Oh, it's so hard being a teenager. I've been reading so many articles recently about young people committing suicide and, 13, 14, 15-year-olds getting into a situation where they're being bullied online, cyberbullying, bullying at school, and just like it's just awful. It just completely breaks my heart. I remember what it was like being a teenager and having all those hormones racing around, but you think you know everything. And
Of course.
yeah, I remember thinking my parents were so not cool. That's embarrassing that they wouldn't let me go to the party or whatever. And so I was like, rebel. Like, you say I can't drink alcohol, I'll start drinking alcohol at 15 and I'll drink every weekend. And you say I can't have a boyfriend, like, I definitely had boyfriends.
Right.
It's funny.
It's some of that, I think, is parents being realistic, like, because we know better, we're realistic about what we can expect from our teens. But I think primary is like, you stay engaged, you stay curious, you try not to be combative. There's understanding, again, lots and lots of boundaries. Like, I advocate for boundaries. And it takes a village, like, I try and spend a lot of time with my son friends, and I know their parents, and I make a point of knowing them, and I make a point of knowing all of his friends, and I let his friends know that they're important. Like, you lean into it. You have to lean into it, not away from it.
And you've worked with incarcerated individuals, like, over the years, right?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
I find that so fascinating. And I'd love you to share just a little bit more about those experiences. I can imagine it would be very enriching. And I'm not sure what level of crimes they had done, but I can imagine, like, sitting there and, like, finding connection and finding empathy and finding all those things would be so profound.
Of course. Yeah. So that path was, I'm very interested in going to where it's hard for people. So, like, I tried to find communities and populations that were suffering. So working with the unhoused is very important to me. Working with incarcerated populations was important to me for a couple of years, and all that changed because of COVID. But to what you're speaking to, I mean, these are a lot of people who, my experience, who struggled in youth, who were under-resourced, who didn't have a lot of safety or attunement, who had to figure it out. The streets are not generous. The streets are not kind. People make mistakes, and then the system is set up to capitalize on the mistakes of those people. And in many ways, kind of profit off those mistakes by keeping them incarcerated. And there's a whole disgusting system around that. My role was going in and practicing meditation with people that, lifers, like they're called LWOPs, so life without parole or death by incarceration. So people who'd committed some pretty heinous crimes in youth, and then they're going to spend the rest of their life incarcerated. It was stunning. I mean, these were human beings. Often I would find in looking at someone like, oh, you're a child. Like, you're a very damaged child who really made some poor decisions, and now you're sort of left to figure it out in this hell realm. A couple of things that stand out to your point was one day I was there, and it was we were doing a ceremony where we were kind of passing on a flower, and I was talking to this man who'd been incarcerated for a long time. And had a really violent past. And when he got to the flower, he said, I haven't touched a flower in 26 years. And there was something about the humanity of that I found really problematic, and another man that I sat with in a retreat. We do retreats over the weekends, like go in the morning, stay for the weekend. And he was getting out, and I said, what are you going to do when you get out? He said, I just want to see a tree. I haven't seen a tree in 25 years. So these questions about, like, the level of our civilized society, of a compassionate society, of a righteous society, doing that to people is, they're interesting for me to think about. I don't feel good about that. I think there's probably a better way to take care of one another.
That's really powerful. Now teaches at prisons, and he said that the work that he does now is, like, some of the most meaningful work he's ever done, because he's working with these people that I think exactly what you're talking about. He's like, there's so much that they hope for and they really want to learn. And he just sees so much in them. And it's just, it's powerful work. I wanted to ask you about younger kids. Do you work with, like, kids that are, ever, like, between 6, 7, 8, 9 years old, like, or families that go through, those years where you're sort of figuring out I don't know, the boundaries and the combativeness and the, pushback. Cause I sometimes feel like through those years, you start to see, I'm like, do I have a teenager or do I have like a 4-year-old?
Yeah.
And so it's really fascinating. I have 3 very different kids, and I have one kid who will sometimes, be really hard on themselves and a little bit like more negative towards themselves when they're getting overwhelmed with emotion and frustrated and everything. And then they like are like, oh, like, I don't know why this is happening. And it like causes a spiral. And then they're able to like finally calm down and come through it. Like, do you have any sort of advice for that when, you have those big, like, I don't know what you call it, like outbursts or spirals, and it's really hard. You want to meet their energy so bad and like set boundaries, and they see red, and then you're just like, oh, this is not working,
Yeah, it's really hard. I think when kids are having big experiences at any age, we may come from the generation where it's like we try and overpower them.
Yes.
And that usually doesn't work. I mean, kids will wear you down. They just have more energy, or you'll probably end up doing something unskillful, and then they'll forget about it, and you'll think about it for like the next 6 months. You're like, oh my God, I can't believe I said that.
Yeah.
When someone's dysregulated, right, and they've left the window of tolerance of how they can sort of engage skillfully, and they're in duress, you just want to try and clear as much territory physically and psychically for them to settle and keep themselves safe. There's no repair. There's no boundaries being sort of enforced in that time. Once they've sort of lost it, like, you're not going to change any behavior. I think the thing to do is go back. So the child has this big event and they're very upset, and then you help them settle, and then you maybe go back to it in a few hours and then go back the next day. And again, what you're doing is building insight so they can understand. So, you ask the child a couple hours later, like, hey, I'm noticing that I'm feeling a lot better. And I'm wondering, are you feeling better? Have you calmed down? And they can notice, and you say, I'm feeling it in my chest. I can like breathe a little easier, and I couldn't breathe before. And they go, oh yeah, me too. And then maybe the next day you say, hey, I was thinking about what happened yesterday. Do you remember what was happening right before? Like, yeah. So an example would be, I wanted someone's attention. They didn't give it to me, and I got so mad. Like, oh, so yeah, I get that. Because sometimes I want attention. I don't get it. You help them build understanding, which is very different than trying to just correct and treat the behavior. Again, I'm not an advocate for like the kid flipping out at the store and throwing everything, and someone's like, use your words. Like, that's not my jam either. Like, you want to move in and take care of the child and really help protect the child from harming themselves and obviously another person, but like sort of slow and steady, creating space, and then noticing really, I think what is fundamental, and I use this as an instrument in any psychotherapy, is like, how am I doing when you're upset? Like, am I breathing? Like, is my body tense? Like, how present am I for your experience? Because if the child's upset and then I'm upset, again, to the thing we talked about earlier, they're cueing into you being upset, and that's scary for them. And they haven't developed the language and the skill and the intellect to be like, hey, your face is scaring me even more, and now I'm even more upset. So to be a calm person when someone's having a hard time is a powerful intervention.
Yes. That is a really good, the thing that you saw where you're like, oh, they're not able to say yet, like, your face is scaring me. I've literally had one of my children who's been like, why are you looking at me like that?
Oh my God, same.
And I'm like, she's like so deeply, and like, she's such an empath, but she like feels it all. And I will literally be like, oh God, like, how was I looking at her? Like, I don't even know. I just know that I'm like, oh, this is so big. And like, I want, I've said this recently where I'm like, I think the big, and I was like, you tell me, but like how, what I'm thinking that we should do in these moments is that I should give you a hug and like, I'll just hold you. And then maybe we can take a few breaths and see where we get, you know? And there was a day where that didn't really work. And then I had to like step back a little bit and let it happen and then come in again and try again. And then it seemed to work with Dad. Like we ping ponged and then Dad came in for the hug and then that seemed to calm down. And I was just like, wow, like it's such a learning experience because each one of them really does it different. You know, it's just, that's right. So you sometimes feel like, God, like I feel sometimes like I'm doing it wrong, you know? And then I have a child who will be like, oh, you know, she'll say like, oh, I'm the worst or like whatever afterwards. And I'm like, no, you're not. Like, it's okay to feel these feelings. It's okay to like be upset. And I don't want you to like be mean to yourself about it, you know? And I don't know, like, I just feel so bad for that.
Can I ask you a question? Have you ever been mean to yourself?
Totally.
Right. So like letting the child know that like, oh, I'm mean to myself too. It's awful.
That's
like
true.
Letting them know that, you know, because again, you know, the children, I have a lot of ideas of even the notion of childhood. It's really not for the child because they're just, for them, it's life. Like childhood is the adult experience of the child as they grow up. And what's really interesting to me and kind of mystical is as your child is growing up, you're remembering in your body and maybe in some part of your psyche what it was like to be that age. So you're like, no, don't have that experience. I had it and it sucked.
Yeah. I'm like, I was like that. I was really mean to myself. I said like, oh, I'm the worst. I'm so bad or like whatever when I like wasn't, you know.
Then,
but
as a parent, you judge yourself like, wait, did I do that in my past? And you get caught in like the catacombs of shame, like shame spiraling. So if you can catch that, you're like, whoa, what if I just actually calm myself down? Like, I get it. I'm so mean to myself too. It's the worst. I know it's so sad. I love you. This is so hard. I hate when I'm mean to myself. You know, just like almost like you're dealing with someone who has a weapon. You're like, it's totally cool. I'm going to back off. We're going to figure this out.
I mean, that's what it feels like.
That's what it feels like. It's a psychic weapon. And when you care so much, you're like, I don't want you to suffer. I don't want you to struggle. And what I tell parents of teens and of younger kids, like they're going to suffer. They're going to struggle. And like, can you meet them in developing the skills to move past that? And can you meet yourself in the skill of compassion, of understanding like that's going to happen and they're going to be okay. And this is a hard moment and it's going to be okay. And you learn together.
I love that. It's really powerful.
Can we talk about your tarot deck?
Yes. Do you have it? Can we see it?
Yeah, I do.
Oh my gosh.
I was looking it up.
I was so excited when this arrived on my doorstep a couple of months ago.
Is it new?
Yeah.
It's new.
Yeah. We just made it. And you know, it's so cool because what happened was during COVID, she reached out to the Your Zen Life Instagram. It was like, hey, do you want to make a tarot deck? I was like, oh my God, do I? And I was really, I follow a form of Tibetan practices. And in the Tibetan practice, like the feminine is really strong and powerful and compassionate and sometimes wrathful. And as a man, as like a father, I was really interested in that. And I was interested in using that as a frame, like, oh, that's such a cool teacher. And the deity is named Tara, and she's like the mother of all compassion. I'm like, oh, what a cool idea to bring this notion of the mother of compassion into cards. And I'm kind of like a nerd about all the things that I like to study. So I wanted to put all these things that I was studying in Buddhist psychology and in my experiences in this deck as a way to kind of what we were talking about earlier, T, of like introducing people these concepts like one day at a time. You could just practice this one thing, you know, so like you could pull a card and you could pull, let's say, this card is so beautiful. It's a really beautiful image, right? It's the earth.
Yes, I'm obsessed with that one.
Right. And it says sympathetic joy for all sentient beings. So you could pull this card and sympathetic joy just a basic concept, is celebrating the good fortune of other people. Right. So independent, like Sarah, something rad happens to you. And I'm just like, that's awesome. She's so rad. I hope it happens. And that's really easy. I like you. But what if I do it for people I don't like? So again, in terms of mental health and the development of emotional intelligence, what if someone I think sucks, something really rad happens? I'm like, oh God, I hope good things happen to you. Well, one thing is I'm not using that energy to be self-hating or to promote any kind of anger, which is actually physically really detrimental. Like stress is a killer. If I'm walking around angry and pissed off that things aren't working out, that can affect my physical health. And if I sit and I practice this idea using a short meditation like sympathetic joy, and we have these phrases and we made some guided meditations. So like, may all of our lives be a celebration. And you think of people and you're like, oh, not, okay, that person too, all of our lives. And you can do this whole visualization of imagining everyone celebrating. And then I finish the meditation, I go in the world and that's in my mind. Well, what we're talking about is neuroscience.
Yeah.
What we're talking about is manifesting, right?
Yeah.
If I concentrate on something and then I deploy time and I deploy energy in developing that skill and I do that on a daily basis, that becomes my life.
Yeah, that's right.
And I just thought it'd be so rad to like just drop these into people's consciousness and like, I don't know, think about this. Think about sympathetic joy for a few minutes a day. Or if you pull another one, like think about your breath for a few minutes a day. And we built all these different technologies into it as just like an artistic offering to try and help people disrupt, that flow of negative critical talk and to kind of move things in a better direction. So that was the goal. That's the goal.
They're so powerful.
Cool. Thank you.
I use them. I got very into the tarot.
Yeah, cool.
After, by the way, growing up thinking it was the most evil thing in the world. Like I still hide my decks from my mom because she's Catholic. You know my mom well.
I love her very much.
We love Paula, but she has very specific beliefs, and the tarot is like known as like evil. And so I had to rewire my brain and my thinking and my judgments.
True.
And I'm like, oh, I'm aligned with this. I love this. I love this work. Like Sarah and I have been doing so much work in the last few years on ourselves spiritually. And
cool, beautiful.
And when I received your deck, I just found it so powerful. It's so uplifting. It just feels good. It's like vibrates joy. It's a really gorgeous, like magnetic deck. Cool. How can people find your deck?
Oh, that's really nice. Thanks. I mean, it's on like Amazon. And
I was going to say Amazon because I looked it up today.
Oh, cool. Yeah, thanks so much. First of all, for the two of you to advocate for self-awareness and spirituality and compassion, being who you are is really beautiful, truly. Like you don't have to take that lane. And the fact that you're doing that as mothers and as people in the arts moving forward is really radical and important.
Thank you.
Thank you.
It sort of found us, didn't it, Sarah?
It did. Yes. In such a beautiful way. Like we just started both cracking open at the same time. And we've gone on a very parallel journey over the last 2 years of like, we find our ups together and then we find our downs together. And like, it's so crazy. It's so nuts, but it's like really amazing. Do you feel like do you practice tarot in the way of which like you draw cards and you feel like the universe like speaks to you? I guess, how do you, do you call it the universe? I call it the universe because I don't really know how else to call it, but like I call it the universe or my team of light. I talk about the source.
I mean, there's a lot of, I have my own terms for it and the practices I have. I think what's interesting about cardology, right? And I understand why people think it's spooky. You can talk about like the concrete. So let's say you pull a card, right? Let me see. So this is actually using Tara, who's always kind of represented green. What are we doing? So it's like someone holding in their hands a person in flames, right? So this is loving kindness for loved ones. Right. So I could pull this card and I could talk about what I see in the concrete. Like, okay, cool. I see these two hands holding fire. So I know that that's warm and they're holding someone. And I could talk about what that means psychologically to me. Like, okay, like being connected to people brings a sense of warmth and it requires engagement. And then psychologically, so you could do concrete concrete psychologically and spiritually, like how do I want to live that? You can use basic framework for that card to card. I think with tarot, like in terms of the major arcana that you see in sort of this 22 card exploration of the soul and consciousness, like going from the Fool into the world, it represents these movements through the material and then the spiritual. And I think anyone can relate to that. I think what's fun for teens especially is you sort of ask them, what do you see? And it's, there's a test in psychology called a Rorschach, which are like these ink blots, and you show a person
that's
one,
right. Yeah,
and you go like,
seen
oh,
them.
that's a butterfly, or that's a flower.
And you're like, you're a serial killer.
Oh, that's a car crash. Yes, that's a dead body.
Burning.
Yes. That's like, it's another dead bunny. Another dead bunny. So you notice that you have this internal story that you see everywhere. And I think cards and meditation and attunement and, collaboration sort of pierce that and bring it open. So whatever really can remind us on a daily basis in a world that is telling us that we are different and disconnected and not worthy of love, that we are connected, that we are floating through the universe together, that we are love, that we are a manifestation of consciousness. I'm all about in whatever form. And this deck was like a really cool way to explore that.
Oh my gosh. You're amazing.
You are amazing.
I'm obsessed with you. Every time, like literally every time, I always say to Mark, I was like, we need to hang out with them like every day, like every day.
I was saying we're trying to get down to Australia and do some meditation stuff down there and some attachments. Yeah,
Come
for sure.
to Byron
Let's
Bay.
do
That's
a Mother Daze.
I love it.
Meditation circle, Pathwork Oracle, all the things.
Let's do Aussie daisies.
I'll meditate with you guys anytime, anywhere.
Oh my God. Done.
I love anything that has to do with any of this stuff now. I'm so freaking obsessed. I literally,
I get it.
I had a crazy experience the other day where I was like having this thought and like at this like sound bath, and I was like asking the universe a question, and I was like, I think I just need a sign. I just want a sign. I don't even know what the sign is. I just want a sign to know that I'm like, this thing that I'm feeling is like right. And then I like left the place that I was at, and it was like 11:11, and I was like, oh, cool. And then I got home and like was doing some stuff, and I was like, oh, what time do I have to pick up Winter? And I looked at the clock, it was like 12:12. And then it was like, I went to sit down and do some work on my computer. It was 1:11, and then my computer was like flashing and doing all this crazy weirdness on my email. And then this like email that I've talked about before, it like my email was in 2007, and this like one email was highlighted in yellow, and it was from my dad who's not alive anymore. And it said, "Hi, Sarah, I've been trying to reach you. Call me Dad." And this is all after the number sequences and then this like flashing. And I called my nanny over and I was like, Sonia, come look at this. Oh my God.
Oh my God. I love it.
And I saw it and I was just like, I literally asked for a sign like 4 hours ago. And I've had basically a sign on every hour on the hour, just of like the universe pouring into me like, yes, everything's fine. Like, take a deep breath. Like, it's all good, And then it was like my dad being like, and here's the cherry on top.
Yeah, totally. I've been trying to reach you. Can you tell that this is all messages from the other side?
Anyway, I just like, this stuff is so cool. And I love having that tool, like your card deck, having that tool to be able to just like go into it. And because I can't just go sit down by myself and try to like, okay, I'm going to try to meditate. I need a song. I need something. I need like something's going to help me like pull into it. So having a reason or a prompt or something would be so helpful. So I love that. So you guys find his wonderful card deck on Amazon. It's very easy. I typed it into Google and there it was.
Yeah, if you ever want, we could set up like a sequence for people who listen to you to do their own meditation, like set them up with a structure and walk through it. And you guys could just share it. Like basically, fundamentally, you need to address posture and you need to address breath and then intention. And that 3-step process can get so deep. Like you can really notice your posture and really spend time with your breath and set an intention like, okay, I'm going to wake up and I'm going to wake up for the sake of everyone waking up and let my waking up support everyone's waking up. That's a practice.
I love that. It's a great idea.
It's a great idea.
Just let me know. We'll do it.
Oh,
Love it.
Well, I love
Okay.
you. Thank you
I
for
love you.
joining us. I'm
Thank you
so
so
glad you
much.
came and did this, Daniel.
Thank you for
Yes,
having me.
thank you.
And guys, if you are interested to learn more about the gorgeous Daniel, you can find him on Instagram, Daniel, Daniel, J. Ahearn,
What's the J?
AHERNLMFT. Anyway,
lot.
it'll be in our show notes.
Yeah.
It'll be in
We'll
our
put it
show
in
notes. But you can follow him there, or just literally go on my Instagram and go to my friends list
There
and
you go.
search Daniel, and it'll come up. Daniel J.
That's
Ahearn,
right.
LMFT.
Well, thank you
You
for
the
being
best.
with us.
Yeah,
You're
thank
And
you
he
so
does,
much.
and he does like sort of mentorships and guidance stuff, and you can contact him to do some therapy sessions and all the things that I have also done with Daniel over the years, and he's saved my butt many times while I'm spiraling. So thank you.
Thank you.
And if you feel inspired, please share this episode with your friends. And you guys can find us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. Thanks for joining us. Bye.
Bye.